tiao? Yeah. Fried kway tiao with fresh prawn. Just quite different from Singapore way of doing it.
Yes, camera, hello.
To be precise, I arrived here 26 July 1977. So today we are talking between us, having this interview on the 15th of September 2012. It's supposed to be 35 years, around 2 months. Little bit of the bean sprout. Yeah, you want to come and help me, Sunny? Although you can't buy it here, but you can cook yourself. It's partly how to cook when you're abroad. Not to feel defeated, you still try to cook your home Singapore food. I have to escape because I know pretty well if I did not, it's only a matter of time I will be put in. And not just put in, they're going to make you confess on the television, thing that you never done before. Not yet. What excuse the government put on to arrest me? It's very simple. They accuse me as a Chinese chauvinist, inciting of violence, which is totally unfounded. What I say was very simple, which I still believe even today to be an important entry port for Singapore economic activities. We need to continue to enhance the English language. But we shouldn't, while we're enhancing the English language, we should not forget to preserve our Malay language, our Tamil language, our Chinese language. For that, they just say you are Chinese chauvinist.
Now, in those days, you have a thing like that. If any member of your family has crossed the government in any way, you cannot get a suitability cert, which means you cannot get into university. That immediately deprived anybody who has a vague connection to any political activism of a tertiary education. So this husband of mine mounted a big kind of student protest and so on. Of course, no use, lost, okay. Then came the Vietnam War, when the Americans decide to bomb Hanoi on Christmas Day. So demonstration outside the American embassy, he and some of his friends. And then a student leader called Tan Wah Pia got charged for rioting with 2 workers, and Francis found himself on the Defense Council. So things got worse and worse, and I realized that very soon he said he's going to be detained. So I told him, I better marry you then. At least I can visit you in prison, you see. And by that time, I know that there are people who have done, dozens of years in prison without trial. So I married him, and true enough, 2 weeks later, the security forces came to arrest him. And me being such a respectable young Singapore doctor, never thought that when they couldn't get him, that they'll get me a month later. As I came out of prison, I went to exile with him. And that's 35 years of not going home until I brought his ashes back, you see.
6年8年80差不多40多50多年了，离开新加坡。在1963年2月2号，又抓了100多人。新加坡我们社会主义阵线啊，也抓了那些领导人啊，林清祥、林福寿、林医生、胡苏凯医生、工会的领袖等等啊，很多都被抓了。那么是外面的工会的领袖、外面的学校的领袖、南洋大学的领袖都被抓了。这样我们想来想去，要被他抓吗？还是说走掉？后来想来想去，我们说还是远走高飞比较自由。我们当时已经有参加地下民族解放同盟了，那么地下组织的负责人呢，就安排我们离开。现在还在这边的跟我这样的人取得身份的人呢，新加坡人，现在还有本来25个。去世了3个了，而我们这样的，
刘波也是一位
啊，刘波啊，包括刘波4个了，去世4个了，哎，那么现在还有剩下21个，现在年纪已经60岁到80多岁了，所以我们唯一的希望呢，就能够在生之前呢，能够回去新加坡见见我的亲戚朋友。
Well, I landed here on the 31st of June 1976. So that makes it 36 years, 37 years. Have I got my maths right? Stop counting. Yeah, life everywhere else is, I suppose, the same. You just have to keep trying. And my real challenge is not really in terms of livelihood, is when and how I can get back to Singapore. So it's for this reason that I still keep interest in what's going on in Singapore. So far, has the Singapore broadcasting, have they used your material?
Yes. I mean, I've only been banned once for a short film.
Right.
So my other films have luckily not had to deal with censors.
'76-77 period was also a period of high repression in Singapore. When I was at the university, that was the time when nobody talks about detention without trial. Nobody knows about the Internal Security Act, although we are supposed to be the creme de la creme. And the moment you start raising that question, I remember the first time I raised the issue of detention without trial was a student leader, and To Chin Chai was sharing the same stage. He went ballistic and was making strenuous criticism of what I said on stage. So that was the political atmosphere in Singapore then. The matter that really got me and my colleagues at the student union in trouble was when we started to identify a problem in Jurong Industrial Estate, where workers being made retrenched, where workers were paid with vouchers issued by the trade union to buy things in the supermarket. That was absolutely illegal. And when we start raising concerns of that, then our time was up. The whole system came down on us heavy. I knew that they had to get rid of me. First stage of getting rid of me was to get rid of me from the student union. And that was how they had to put me in jail for a year. And to get rid of the student union was to get rid of the base. They had to get rid of my colleagues, so the deportation. And after which, they had to reconstitute the whole student union, so much so that the union was no longer able to do what we did. The best thing for me to continue what I wished to do then was to leave the country.
Where did you buy this from?
No, a friend gave.
Mangosteen. Apparently it's mangosteen season. Is it big time?
Oh, somebody brought it.
Yeah. So, you know, Juliet just gave me this. She insisted that I should eat this. Yeah, over the last 35 years, there are times when I just said, I want to go home, you know. I want to be back in 100A Upper Serangoon Road and, you know, and maybe work in SGH or something like that. But as the years go by, I think it's becoming less. Of course, when Francis died, it was terrible, you know, because it dawned on me that I'm going to die alone in London. And then my sisters will have to take my ashes back.
I'm Sui Kim. I live in KL. I'm a Singaporean. Sui Chai's sister.
I'm Sylvia, Sui Chai's sister-in-law and sister of Francis.
I'm Christina, and sister of Francis. Yeah. Sui Chai is my dearest sister.
Now, thank God for Skype. So because we are in 4 of us in 4 different countries, so every Saturday night we will go on Skype. 4 of us.
You know, the ISD was right. When I was in prison, the ISD said, you know, you think England very good, you know. You go to England, you're nobody, you know. Down here, you're Division 1 civil servant, you know, and we have looked through your records. You got everything, you know. You go to England, you're nobody. And Francis also nobody. You're both refugees. So it did not register. But when life got very tough in London, it all came back, you see.
So this is as far away from Singapore as one can be. Here we are. We had one of the biggest concentration of architects and architecture students. So these young architecture students, without my knowing, work out how much of junks I had, and then put them all into these cubicles, which exactly was the same amount of rubbish. The beauty is that it was built like a huge jigsaw puzzle. It's all cut in a workshop using CNC machine and assembled here. So each of these pieces are individual pieces. Little suitcases. Now, if for nostalgic reason, when I go back, I will try to, but rather difficult, to put all our belongings into these 2 suitcases, which was what we had when we first came to this country. So this is a piece of these are little pieces of nostalgia. Well, it's as I say, everything has a beginning, a middle. Now these 2 suitcases represent the beginning of our lives in the UK. Where it will end, I'm not sure at this stage.
Nice flower. Okay. Okay, how about this photograph? What this photograph tell us? Oh, this is something when they first come to this country. I was still wearing sarong when I first came to this country. I still wear sarong today. All my parents' saving, more or less, all gone. They give me about 15,000 Sing dollars. Then I spent to almost buying my way out, really, paying this, paying that on the way to here. So I arrived in London, just about a couple of £100 left. So it was in quite a desperate situation. Every day I look for the coin box, look at the newspaper to look for a job. So I didn't manage to find a job in a hotel. Do everything what the hotel need me to do. So 3rd week after here, I found a job. Yeah, this is when I have a translation company, Katonya, East Asia. Actually, Wapiao is sitting behind this curtain. We share office. And from there, I accumulate little money and then decide to go back to do my study. City University, that's me. I see the computer really funny, you know, because I'm in the IT business. I find it quite interesting. Sunny, Daddy put it up for you. Not for throwing. Yeah, not for throwing, huh? Had to put it up, huh? Uh-huh. It was 2010. Basically, we have a very simple wedding party, not elaborate, just a few guests. Ceremony hotel in Bruway, Johor Bahru. 2010 mean I'm 60 years old. Do I look like a 60-year-old man? I'm 60 though. About 5 years ago, over the internet, one day the junk mail come through. I happened to click on the junk mail, and then suddenly my wife invite me to go and see her. Okay, I just casually went to see her, and then things just happened. We meet each other immediately. We feel strongly between us. I think she feels the same way. I just casually asked, would you like to come to London? She would, without any hesitation, say yes. Nelson, come over here. Kitty. Come here. Why I was delaying my fatherhood, initially was very conscious sort of decision, because constantly I know if one day I happen to travel abroad, any accident happened to me, nobody gonna own up about me. They're gonna put me back to Singapore. If I have someone, which I think is totally unfair to whoever to be my partner or my wife, which I know, what would happen to me. But somehow things change. Children can give you many, many sort of interesting things you never thought of. Having 2 little kids, now I never experienced before, is excellent. For Singaporean who haven't got children, please try that. It's an excellent thing to do. Excellent thing to do. Okay, give Daddy a hug.
Give Daddy a hug, big hug.
Enjoy your day. Next month, October, because my mom is having her 95th birthday in Singapore. My wife, my kid will all be there, and I'll be waiting the other side of the causeway for my mom to come over as usual to meet them up as such.
I have another copy. See, not forgetting that I still have Lee Kuan Yew's work here.
Have you read it?
No, I only refer to it for my research. But this is a very good book on poor J.B. Jeyaretnam. It's, I can't see how Singaporeans can ignore books like this. When I first arrived here, the fortunate thing is that there was already a strong Malaysia-Singapore student movement existing in London and all over the provinces. So there was a call. So in my mind, it was how I could continue that process of challenging the lack of democracy in Singapore. And towards that end, I spent lots of time touring campuses, giving talks. And that was how subsequently it became an issue in 1987. Some of my very close friends was involved with in my student days in Singapore University, and those who were involved with me in the UK, where this whole group of 22 young people were detained. Some of them, I've not even known them, but they were all accused of being associates with me in this conspiracy to turn Singapore into a Marxist state. And it's just an exercise to give someone a bad name to justify their detention without trial. When that happened, my ability to rebut those allegations were limited. Limited because the Singapore media just have a complete boycott of what I have to say. And I fully understand that many of my close friends in Singapore would then be very hesitant to communicate with me, because careers could be affected if they are known to be associating with me. And I accepted that situation, but just get on to doing what I set myself out to do, and that was to build my career, because then I graduated from Oxford. My original idea of doing law was eventually to practice in Singapore. And when they removed my citizenship, that was it.一定要你报这么多，一定要报，必须报这，对对对。Johnson, how are you? Everything is okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sân nắng canh hả? Sân nắng canh. Mà sân nắng canhนี้ก็เดียวสายอยู่หน่อยที่เรียนค่ะใช้สันนัตกันอ่ะก็ได้ใช้สันนัตกันเข้าใจไหมใช้สันนัตกันอ่ะ ไปละค่ะไปนี่อ่ะเบื่อไม่นี่ค่ะ如果早收班10点多工人就走了，11点工人走，剩下的工作啊，我孩子还自己去送。
工人大概6个，1、2、3、4、6、7个，包括孩子的人7个。
他读文学系的，中国复旦大学，上海复旦大学读文学系的啊，回来就找不到工作啊，这时候后来自己就开面谈了，慢慢做起来。我们是起初参加行动党啊，后来因为行动党要搞新马合并，我们反对呀、我们就一批就撤出来去摄政那边了，搞摄政主义阵线。那1963年呢，22他要逮捕我们，就离开新加坡了。
很多我们的同志都在新加坡牺牲。那你都知道，谢太保这样一个民主人士，争取议会斗争民主人，给他关了几十年，他的青春就关掉了。这样的政府有什么民主可言？啊？
为什么参加马共？
参加马共是被逼的。我原来就是行动党党员、行动党干部。经他这么一来，我们流亡了，流亡马共接受我们嘛，是吧？所以。我们后来参加马共，就是这样被逼参加马共。
几年没回去？
离开到现在。
我离开到现在了，1963、22事件离开到现在了。
但是新加坡得到独立以后，所以你们就算是成功了吧？所以成功了以后，为什么还在奋斗呢？
成功什么？成功我们都没有得到应有的尊严呐、他们有承认我们是反殖的斗士吗？他们承认我们对新加坡独立有贡献吗？没有，相反的，他们迫害我们，压迫我们，这样罢了。我们回去他还要逮捕，他有逮捕令、通缉令，这样情况我们不能回去的。
但是现在我们出来了是吗？我们和谈出来了是吗？我们应该照理就可以回新加坡嘛，我们那时还没拿泰国公民证嘛，我们可以回新加坡，我们新加坡公民嘛，他不给我们回嘛，如果我们让我们回要5个条件，
比如封杀我们的信仰自由，一定要脱离共产党，在电台宣布脱离共产党，也要放弃信仰共产主义，这个信仰自由嘛，是吧？我们争取尽量争取，很多人都知道我们的心声呢，我们想回去，我们是新加坡人，回我们自己的国家。
有没有好像是每天看新加坡报纸啊，看看新加坡怎么样？
我们都
2
份，马来西亚的，新加坡的订不到，还有一个泰国华文报，我们每天都有看这个报纸。
所以马新的政治新闻也是很
经常关心。我们是搞政治的，脱离不了政治。 所以在海外，我们也是要经常关心政治，包括中国中央电视台的，我们也经常看。香港凤凰卫视，我们先看，要懂得世界大事了。我们做过政治的人，不能放弃这个政治。
For years, you see, I was in the UK practicing as a doctor. And when I got my surgical exams and so on, you know, I became a surgeon after a long struggle and was operating on British patients, you see. I still got a sense of pride. I said, oh, you know, how I wish I'm operating on Singapore patients, you know. I still see things in terms of Singapore, non-Singapore. Singapore hospital, non-Singapore hospital, and so on and so forth. I can't relate to people on a level playing field. Francis has got a healthier psychology than me. He's always happy. He goes in London, he cleans the toilet, then he goes in the evening to the pub and mix up with all sorts. And for him, he's at home, you see. He always built up a big network of friends, no matter where they are, you know. So when the miners went on strike, he collect tin kind of baked beans and so on, put in a sack and go on a bus to Yorkshire and support the soup kitchen. So that's Francis for you. And sometimes, you see, I get so upset, you know, how can you be so happy, you know, when I'm so miserable, you know, I'm so homesick. After a while, you see, I begin to realize, you see, people are people everywhere. Patients are patients. And it doesn't matter whether they're Singapore patients or British patients or Palestinian patients, Lebanese patients, they're human beings and you treat them the same. So these are all things I've got to unlearn. Francis, to be fair to him, is homesick as well, because he has got more to be homesick about. So one day I found him writing this letter to his mother, you see. Of course, the pressure came finally to Mum, you see, to ask her son back, and she wrote, Mum, you know, I want to tell you a story of a young man. A young man who also wrote this letter to his father. He said that, you know, there are riches in the whole world, there are all these things, you know. But what profit a man if he acquires the whole world and lost his own soul? And then he said, Mum, do you know you named me after the young man who's Francis of Assisi? I've lost a lot, you know. I've lost you, I've lost my brothers and sister, my career and so on. And here am I, a refugee. But Mum, I got my soul. And I think his mum understood, because then his mum phoned and said, look, you do not come back and make confessions and implicate your friends and put other people in jail. I'll be very ashamed of you. And if you come back, I will take a gun and I'll shoot you, and then I'll go and shoot the chief of the ISD. This is Peranakan language, very passionate, you see. So I think his mother was converted to understand what's standing up for justice. It was only when I read his letter to his mother that I realized how much it affected him, you see. But he never let on. He will sing, he'll write songs. When he's fleeing exile, he writes songs about exile. He wrote about 15th of February, which was a day when he got to flee Singapore.
"'Twas the 15th of February, the date of the night. They kept knocking and banging my door. I slipped quietly away, but the others could not, and I know that I'd see them no more. They had taken so many, how many I know not. Well, there's Mahar and Mike and Sammy, and there's Chinqui and others, the brave and the tall, and the one small behind Changi Wall. Oh, my dear bride, my dearest, just 2 weeks we're wed. Please remember the vow that we made. I have left my homeland for a place far away, but I know I'll be back home someday. Oh, my people, the ones that I love, I will never see you again till the storm clouds gather at break of the dawn and Bunga Raya shall bloom in rain.
passport 路啊，要逼，哎夾出嚟咗啦，要逼。我係定，我係同。睇得係同住。
Welcome to Singapore, ladies and gentlemen. And to all Singaporeans and residents of Singapore, a warm welcome home.
When my first son was born, the first thing I can think of, he had to be a Singaporean. He had to be a Singapore citizen. So immediately, within 2 weeks, I wrote to the Singapore High Commission, said, can you please send me the form? I want to enroll my son to be a Singapore citizen. There are 2 conditions I could not fulfill. First, you might have a Singapore passport. Second, you might have a valid exit permit. That means for all the army boys who left Singapore, you have to have a proper exit permit. I have none. So we end up no choice. We'd apply for the British passport for my son. So that's it. So I feel a bit disappointed because I do want my son not only to be a Singapore citizen, I want him to join Singapore Armed Forces. I'm a strong supporter of Singapore Armed Forces. I always do. I believe we must have a strong defense forces for Singapore. I strongly believe that. Nobody in the world can defend Singapore except Singapore itself. We want to survive as a peaceful, prosperous country. We must be able to defend ourselves. I strongly believe that. I always believe that. I always support a strong Singapore Armed Forces. So I want my son eventually join Singapore Armed Forces. That was a main motive. I want him to be a Singapore citizenship, to be a Singapore citizen. That was my real disappointment. Okay, my son cannot be a Singapore citizen and eventually join Singapore SAF. So even today, I feel a little bitter whenever I think about this. I don't know why Singapore have to isolate people like myself who have such a strong sense of belonging.
转机随想2006年5月17日，我转机了。原是新加坡土生土长公民，没料到离乡背井近半个世纪，而且做了12年泰国的无国籍国家建设者。如今，我成了持有智慧卡身份证的泰国公民，无奈啊，却也庆幸。无奈不是我不爱新加坡，庆幸泰国的天地宽容。海峡殖民地种牛痘的印记，迄今还留在左臂上。牛车水、基隆街、大门楼、丹阳巴嘎、巴士班样、红灯码头，童年少年结伴游荡，怎么会忘记？海山街口，日军投下第一枚炸弹。灯婆街道两旁，待收敛的句句诗。史诗在发臭，百思华举白旗投降。谁知狗去猴子来，米字旗又重新飘扬。就嘎浪机场万众齐喊 Merdeka， 风雨中自治邦迈向独立。这一切的一切，对我来说，见证历史的故事讲不完。新加坡啊，新加坡，你可知道，我对你的今天和明天仍然挂赌牵肠。2006年5月25日，写于泰南和爱，陈新荣。
Children who are not afraid, we are also not afraid.
The Palestinians also took me out of my very parochial kind of world outlook. So to them, I'm grateful, very grateful. I was at that time a trainee surgeon in St. Thomas's. In 1982, one day when I went home, I switched on the television and I saw a city being bombed in a most cruel manner, and I was shocked. I didn't believe that Israel did this to other people. Just a few weeks later, an appeal came from Christian Aid asking for a surgeon to go and treat the wounded, and then begin a journey of 28 years. When I met the Palestinians, I realized that the whole nation of Palestine is in exile. None of them can go home. And the question of, where are you going to have your children be brought up? Where are you going to be buried? Where are ashes going to be when you die? How are you going to meet your family? Will they see you, or will your mother die without seeing you, and so on? All these are questions which the exiles go through. To be a Palestinian, you not only have to build, you have to rebuild. You not only have to die, you've got to die a refugee. You not only got to stay hopeful, you got to believe in your hope and have faith and never let it go. You know that probably in your lifetime, the 4.5 million refugees or the people in diaspora will not go home. But you have to have faith that your children will. If not, their children will. And it's not only a question of dying. Why did they die refugees? I am also a refugee. So that really focused me into realizing that we are not an island. we live in relation to each other, and we need each other, and we share our strengths and weaknesses through each other. So that was the injustice situation. But as a doctor, there's only one thing I can do. So that's why we set up Medical Aid for Palestinians, so that there is a charity who will support the Palestinians, whether they're living under occupation, in exile, in the refugee camps, in the diaspora. So that was how Medical Aid for Palestinians was founded.
What is the significance of the bow tie in front? They look at it and say, this one is like a champagne socialist.
Because you're supposed to be a Marxist, so you might as well play your role towards it.
I'm very honored and very pleased to be able to launch these two books. And I think Wah Piao, if Yu-Sing is right, should have brought a bottle of champagne and we could have crashed a bottle of champagne to launch the books.
Those who voted in the PAP over the years, in the last 50 years, they could see their housing has improved from slums to high-rise. They have seen themselves progress from being unemployed to being employed. Their own position from being illiterate or with little education, they are able to bring their children to university level, enjoy tertiary level education. Now that we have achieved this very high level of economic development, who would still feel the need for high level of political control?
I started life as a very much a young man, a young student at the age of 24. And of course, if the issue of democracy in Singapore is no longer an issue, then I can say that there is a closure. But insofar as what I started off to achieve, to raise the issue of democracy in Singapore, that is still unfinished business. And I just don't like to close a file when we don't have it satisfactorily resolved. It's very much within my DNA.
祝你生日快乐。4烧啊，2烧，那个 cake 在哪里？啊，好，很好，很好，看到了。哦，这个是你们今晚要吃的。妈妈几点切那个蛋糕？好好好好。好的，没有问题的。OK。好的，我知道了，我知道。好 ，OK， 没有问题。好的。没有问题的啦。好，没有问题的。那个蛋糕什么几点？他们切蛋糕几点？
他应该不是新加坡。
吉隆坡人。
本来是这个不是新加坡的。
这个是新加坡人，他的妻子吹口琴的。
哦，这个自己做的，在部队自己做的。你看部队里面真的有很多人才的。没有，我们那时候的吊床啊， 在森林里面睡觉的时候就是绑架的吊床，这些大家都藏起来了，出来以后也不敢给人家看了。
我们乌洞这边呢，都是山丘啊，又是原始森林啊，它飞机又不容易炸到我们，坦克车跟装甲车不能够进。那山丘45度以上，那就很难上了。对，所以我们占了有利的地形。
我们这些的想法就是一进入这个森林，我们就是坚持在，就算老死了，我们就说死了我们就埋葬在那种阿大树的下面，这样。当时完全没有想到会再出来的。
所以我们也没有想到重新会见到我们的孩子。4、5年以后才见到，我们都好像是很惊奇的感觉，以为这一切都从此我们一进入森林就隔绝了的。
我们在学校学的，马共和暴力有很亲密的关系的。
马共啊，被迫采取暴力来进行争取民主独立，这个是很不得已的。从马来亚共产党1930年组织成以后啊，英国政府就凡是马共的成员就逮捕、迫害、杀害。在马来亚和新加坡要投降给日本人的前夕，才把被抓去在监牢里面的马共的成员释放。释放了呢，把新加坡的最重的抗日的那个担子呢，交给马共的人负责。这样子呢，你看他跟英国人打了7、8年的仗，牺牲几千人啊！一直到1955年，我们主张华联和谈，英国政府通过阿杜拉曼提出的条件，就是说，如果马共要公开要投降先，所以陈平只好回答说，如果要我们投降，只好打到最后一个人咯。
这个打算要出来的时候拍的哦。
87年。
87年。
我们这个准备说，如果打仗牺牲，还可以做纪念。
I came to Malaysia because of Dr. Lim Hock Siew. This is memorial representing Francis. Of course, if Francis was alive, he would do that. And I also want to meet up with the old guys and really touch base with them, because I really don't know when will we see each other again, you see. Yeah. And it's important, you see, to really touch base and thank them for what they have done.
Back in Singapore?
No, I'm still in Singapore.
朋友们、同志们，今天我们集合在这，是要来悼念我们尊敬的林福寿医生。他是一个政治扣留者，他被扣留长达19年余。他是反制和争取独立的斗士，所以今天呢，我们在这里悼念他。
We were detained together in Operation Cold Storage in February 2nd, 1963, and we were released a few days apart in 1983.
This is Rose. Fine.
yeah.
I'm on the way with Sweet Chai. Sudah makan? Yes, but have you makan or not? If you haven't makan, we'll beli barang kasih awak.
I found a whole lot of Malaysian $1 in Francis's wallet.
Oh.
I'm feeling a lot better now, not so upset, so I'm going through Francis's things a bit at a time. 你有1蚊我哋有咯，嗱，唔好俾佢10蚊啊。Never mind. If you want another $1, I also have.
Okay. So my daughter is still in the States. And the 2 boys are in Singapore. Right. The one is married, one is not married.
So Rose was pregnant with a younger child, okay? And they came to arrest Jin Kui. So the decision is whether it is fair, you know, to go in the long prison term and leave your wife pregnant with your child, you see, because you see, in those days, it's no joke. You see, the government can lock you up for dozens of years, you see. So the in-law say, don't worry, we'll bring the kid up if you need us to, you see. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, I think so.
And then he turned out to be the most wonderful young man because I met him, you see, in London. Wonderful, caring and sensitive person. Yeah. I hope he had a wonderful wife. Has he got a wonderful wife?
Well, I think so lah.
As a father-in-law? Okay. I'm sure.
All right, thank you.
Sight, I think you might not know, you know, what you mean to Francis. You have been his mentor and his inspiration for many things. And that's why he wrote this song and his name was Said for you. You remember? He came here many years ago, he sang it for you.
Yes, I think he did, yeah.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
I remember.
I think it was way back in the 2nd of February, 1963.
Yes.
Yeah, Operation Coastal.
Yeah,
right?
correct.
Yeah. That was the first time I met Said. But Said and I have got a very special relationship because he was my future wife's neighbor.
Yes,
in Jalan Gasing,
yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So, you know, in Changi, when we talk of Jalan Gasing or KL, you know, there was that special thing.
yes. Very special thing. Yeah.
How many of you roughly?
Oh, at the peak, more than 100.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Wow, that is something, isn't it?
Yeah. I think during the time we were there, that was the beginning of that detention.
Yes.
And conditions were better than later. Yeah. Conditions were much better than later. Because later, you know, all kinds of pressure would be put upon them.
Yeah.
By then, I had already left. And soon after I left Singapore, I went to Canada to do my graduate studies. On my return 4 years later, they were still in.
Yeah.
You know, and my heart pain.
And we learned a lot about what it means by detention without trial. Because we were there for years, you see. Kofang was with me for a few years now. The first 4 or 5 years?
4.5 years old.
4.5 years. I don't know why they continue to detain me for another 10, 12 years. Altogether about 17 years now.
Very upset. It's a very black chapter in Singapore history. And even right now, I cannot begin to quantify the cost to the younger people. What is done to your generation is unacceptable, totally unacceptable. But to continue that kind of behavior towards a younger generation is a crime.
Yes. You see, the meaning of the struggle is to make the people, especially the younger generation, aware that our society today is not a free society. And our society today is being suppressed by the people in power. And these people who are in power today has been the people or continuation of the people in power, even in our days, during our struggle days. So in that sense, in my opinion, the struggle continues. Families are allowed to visit us once a week, half hour.
Happy birthday to Apple. Happy birthday to you.
Okay, Apple, all right. Tây dịch hoa kỳ quá.
No, cái chỗ đủ đồ.
Chưa đủ đó. Được một ta đi kêu quá.
Lưỡi chả
Tụi mày kêu một ta lại kêu quá.
Ê, chính cái u à, cái cái.
U ta lại.
Wow, con cái chiều này có bất đây ở trên ta.
Được bố ý điều.
Dạ, đây nào.
Bé lại in cọ vào. Kìa in cọ là.
Bò lá, bò xay đeo.
Bò xay đeo à? Hay vì à?
Xay đeo, hay vì.
Hay vì.
Cái này chạy xe là cậu đi có được kéo mà.
Cậu tập tỷ đi vào. Thì nào đi?
Cậu tập tỷ về có đây.
Cậu tập tỷ. Ta chỉ để cậu tập tỷ.
If none of this happened, I really do not know. I might get to be very prominent, make a lot of money, and maybe have some children, save my mother a lot of heartaches, and that would be unthinkable. Not to say that it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. But the alternative is what I've been through. Making a stand is expensive. Supporting those who make a stand can be just as expensive. Personally, I think. But you know, until you're there, you really don't know. And maybe there's also an attitude that my generation did not fight hard enough to bring democracy and freedom to Singapore. But I can tell you some of us did, and we tried quite hard. Whether we failed or we did not is not the point, but we did try.
I am a child of my island, the fairest island by far. Selatan tanah Melayu, anak pulau Singapura. Inilah riwayat kita. We have a story to tell you of how we worked hard to make this part of our tanah airku. Our fathers came from the mainland and other lands far away. They made the old street Temasek the thriving city of today. Dari dulu sampai sekarang, siapa membina sekolah dan mendirikan bangunan, ialah semua rakyat kita. So as a child of my island, I know the ink is not dry. Our story still yet unwritten. Today I'll join my people's cry.